based in Iowa, and we make products for colleges and universities. And we've collaborated with your school to develop your new bulletin product, which you've had for a while. This is considered a refresher training. So a lot of the items that I'll be talking about are things that you might already know about, but it's just good to get a refresher on some things that you already know, or maybe some things that you aren't sure about that you haven't touched in a while. So this again is your bulletin URL, and most of you probably already know this, nextbulletin.westall.edu. When you go into that site, we want you to use Chrome, Firefox, or Safari. And just as kind of a for context, this product was really as something that's benefiting students, so they can search for programs and courses online a little bit more easily. And also it is accessible on all browsers, all different types of devices, and it is ADA compliant. And that's something that's really important to us when we develop our software. There are some components that I'll point out that are specifically important for people who are using any kind of assistive learning devices. And of course, it's easy to use and also easy to search for information. A few items of terminology that I want to point out. One is page owner. That is the individual or the role who is allowed to make modifications to a page. It's also called a page editor or page initiator. Workflow is basically the approval path of a page. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of what that interface looks like, which again, you probably have seen before, but just to kind of reinforce some things that you might not be aware of. And then really the approve button is what we want you to click if you are in an approval role. And that just moves the page forward into the approval process. And then rollback does allow you to send the page back to the person that did make changes or turn the page in rather. And so I'll show you how to do a rollback if that's something that you need to do. This is the approval interface. You have 3 icons to choose from: edit, rollback, or approve. And obviously approve is the one we would want you to click more often than not. And then really the whole point of this is just to be familiar with the interface, understand how to make basic edits and updates in the page body editor that I'll show you. All right, so with that, I'm just going to go ahead and go into your bulletin. And I am on a particular page, this computer science and engineering page. And when you go in and log into your bulletin, you will see this edit page icon up on the top left-hand corner. So when you click on that, it will then prompt you to see all these tools at the top, as well as at the bottom, it will say who you're logged in as. I'm logged in as Barb, but that's irrelevant. It's more just the point of I'm logged in as a regular user. The other thing logging in will allow you to see is this pencil icon. So if I close this toolbar, I don't see that pencil icon anymore. But when I click on the edit page icon, that pencil icon appears. And I am on a page with multiple tabs. So, I see the overview tab, the faculty tab, majors, minors, courses. So each one of these has its own pencil icon, and that's going to be your best path to go in and edit or update any information you need. And I just created this one as a demo for this training today. So I'm going to go ahead and go into this training tab, and I'll show you some key things that you'll need to know about. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and click on the pencil icon, and it's going to open up what we call the page body editor. Now, just FYI, I put the word training on here, but if this was a blank page, just so you know, if I erase that word training and clicked OK, and OK is the same thing as save, that training tab goes away. And that doesn't mean that it's like completely gone, but it exists up at the top here on the toolbar. And so, you know, if by chance you need additional tabs created, that's something that Jennifer can do. But if you're looking for a tab or trying to figure out where that tab went, the toolbar is a good place to start out with and make sure that tab actually exists. So each tab has a corresponding pencil icon on the toolbar here. So you can see courses, minors, majors, faculty, etc. The overview tab does not have its own pencil icon. That will always be correlated with this page body pencil icon up here. But for the training one, there is a pencil icon. And once I open that up and type in a word such as training or any word, that then only then will that tab appear. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and click again back in the pencil icon. And hold on one. All right, apologies for that. Okay, so I'm back here in the pencil icon or in the page body editor. And a few things that you'll want to know about in terms of the formatting is what I'll start with first. So one is headings. So if I wanted to make a heading on a page, you want to make sure that it is formatted correctly. And the way to do that is to go over to this drop-down menu right here where it says normal, and then go down and select heading 2. Now, heading 2 is going to be your first option because heading 1 is actually being used by this title here. So that's why heading 1 is not an option. Heading 1 is always going to be reserved for the title of the page. And so that's why heading 2 is always an option in terms of the first one you see. If I want to make a subheading, one thing that I want to do is make sure that it is organized kind of in chronological order. So if I do a subheading under my main heading, I want to make sure to identify that as a heading 3. And really the key thing here is if you are organizing any kind of text and do need headings, you want to make sure it's uniform. So you're not starting with a heading 5 and then going to a heading 3 and then going to a heading 2. You just want to make sure it's a little bit organized and it makes sense in terms of the information that you're presenting. All right, so that's the heading component of it. The other item that I want to point out has to do with the numbered icons and the bulleted icons. And just note that the items that I'm pointing out are really the key things that are important to you. So I know there's a lot of icons here, but you'll only need to know really the key ones that I'm pointing out. So this one here where it says normal, heading 1, heading 2 that we just talked about. The next one I'm going to talk about are the numbered icons and the bulleted icons. So this is important because really for people who use any kind of assistive learning technology, such as screen readers, it programmatically discerns this information as being able to interpret that a little bit more properly. So when somebody is looking at this information or reading it, it will interpret it as 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, and so forth. And it will do something similar with bulleted items. So anytime you have content that lends itself to a numbered list or a bulleted list, we do encourage you to use those tools when possible. The other items are going to be fairly easy. The bold, italicized, underline, that's no different than what you would come across in Microsoft Word. So I'm not going to demo those, but those are the exact same in terms of the functionality as you would expect to use in Word. And then the other item is special characters. So let's say you have a word like cafe and you want to you want to make sure to have that accent over that E. So the icon for the special characters is going to be this little anchor here where it says insert special character. And so when you click on that, it's going to open up this box where then you can select your specific character, and then it will input that character in the text. So this icon here is specifically for special characters. And as you can see, as I hover my mouse over these tools, you'll see that there's a screen tip that appears that really denotes kind of, what that symbol represents. So the alignment, of course, those are the same as in Microsoft Word. These three are the same: bold, italicize, underline, special characters. And then the normal is going to be your normal text. When you click on the drop down, you will see your heading options here. Okay, so the next thing I want to go over is how to do links. There are 3 different types of links that you can do in our software. And the first one is an external link. And I'm going to show you how to do all of these here. So let me just write down some words here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So the first one is my external link. And so here I'm selecting the word and then going to this chain link icon right here where it says link. And so I'll go ahead and click on that, and I will see this box appear. And here in the URL field, I want to make sure I type in the URL. And so when I do that, I want to make sure I have the the HTTP part of the URL. That is what is telling the software that you want the user to go outside the bulletin. So I've typed in the HTTP, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So that is my external link. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK for a second, and we'll come back to this in a minute. And we'll test these out as well. So the next one is my internal link. And my internal link is going to be where I'm directing users somewhere else within the bulletin. So if I go back, I see this this breadcrumb trail here that tells me where these pages are coming out of. And so let's say I go ahead and click on engineering. And when I do that, I get the engineering page. Now, instead of copying and pasting the whole URL, because it's an internal page, I want to select what's called the relative URL. And my URL is slightly different because of how I log in to your bulletin. But I want to select everything after, for me, it would be everything after the .com. For you, it would be everything after the .edu. So here I've selected everything after, let's say if this was me, or if this was you rather, it would be everything after the .edu, including that /. And again, this is what we call the relative URL because it's an internal page. So I'm going to select that and copy it, and then go back to that computer science page and go back and click in the page body editor of my training tab. And then I'm going to select the word engineering. Then I'll go back into this link icon, open that up. And in the URL field, I'll paste that relative URL. So we see undergrad /engineering. So that is my relative URL, my internal link. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. And then the last one is an email link. So the email link, how that works is I'm going to go ahead and select my word, my registrar, and then go back into the link icon. And then in the URL field, what I want to do is type in the words mail to : and then registrar, there we go, registrar at westlaw.edu. So mail to colon, and then the email address, no spaces. Once I do that, I'll click OK. All right. Now, before I go and test all this, there is another link that I want to show you, and that is what's called an inline course reference. And an inline course reference is where you are typing in the course code in a sentence or a paragraph, and you want that course code to generate a pop-up bubble so you can see the course description. And so to do that, there's a couple different ways to do that. So let's say I want to type in a course code here. So E81 CSE 498. All right, so that's my course code, but I want it to stand out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is select that course code, and then the only icon in terms of all these other icons, this is the icon for your inline course reference, where it says insert edit database field. So it looks like a little thumb with an arrow pointing to the right. One of my colleagues describes it as a stack of pancakes. I don't really know about that, but in any case, when I click on that, what'll happen is it will then generate this blue box, and I'll see that course code kind of reappear in a different format with the name of that course. All right, now what that looks like from the user standpoint is, when I click OK here and I scroll down, the user, when they see this on the page, they can click on this and it will then generate that pop-up box with the description of that course. So that's what the user sees. That's what that blue box is generating. Now let's say, for example, I didn't mean to write 498. I wanted a different course instead. So anything in a blue box is actually clickable. So it says inline course, double click to edit here on the screen tip. So I can just double click here and it will generate what we call a course picker. And it will already have the School of Engineering selected. I just have to select my department. So I'm going to go down to computer science here. And so now it will generate my list of courses that I have. And let's say I actually meant 497 instead of 498. So now I can just select 497 here and go ahead and make that selection, click OK, and it will automatically make that change in that blue box. Now, on the flip side, let's say I wanted to find something in the course picker. Instead of writing it out, I can go ahead and click on this icon here. And then I will make sure to, that engineering school will automatically be selected because that's the page I'm on. I just need to select the appropriate department. And then I can select my course and then hit OK, and then it will load that information in that blue box. So as you can see, the blue box does not publish, but it is your indication that it is going to be generating this pop-up box with the course description. Now, the other thing that is a potential scenario is, let's say you type in something that is, maybe you type it in incorrectly by accident. So let's say I type in E81 CSE 501. And when I go ahead and select it and click on this thumb icon, it will say course not found because you don't have 501. All right, now, when I click OK here, you'll see that the 501 will say course not found, and it will be in a red box. Now, the good news is the red box does not actually publish in your bulletin. However, if you want to make sure that you're not generating any red boxes on your page, and let's say you have content that is just very, very long on a page and you're trying to make sure that you don't have any red boxes, what you can do is click on this green check mark right here on the toolbar that says accuracy report. So when I click on accuracy report, it will then generate this. One of the things that it will generate is saying, okay, this CS501 not found. So it will show you, okay, you're generating something, you're displaying something on the page that is actually, it doesn't exist. So you'll probably need to fix that. So that's a quick and easy way to see if you have any red boxes. Okay, I just want to pause here. Okay, so there's a question here about course descriptions. Ask where the course descriptions come from. The course descriptions will be pulled from the, yeah, Jennifer wrote this to everybody, the WCRSL FL21 curriculum file. She'll be sending out details about that process early next year. We'll start the imports on March 1st. Okay, so hopefully that answers that individual's question. Thank you. All right, so now we have a few different links. So let's just test these out before we continue. So if I click on Washington University here, I should then be redirected to your home page. So that's my external link, so we know that worked. Engineering is my internal link. So if I click on engineering, it should then redirect me to the engineering page, which it just did. So we know that worked. And then the registrar is an email link. So if I click on registrar, what happens is it will then open up this box and prompt me to choose my email account provider of choice. And then I can go ahead and write an email to the registrar's office. And that email address will already be inputted in the to field. All right, now the other thing that you can look at before you finish is what this looks like in a PDF. So one of the things on your toolbar here is View as PDF. So when I click on this View as PDF, I'm going to see this entire page in a PDF format. So I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger so we can all see it. And it's going to start with the very front of that page. So if you remember, the front of that page had faculty and all these other components. So I'm just going to scroll down a ways to find the piece that we were working on. And this is a long list, I realize. Let's see, 15 pages. Okay, so let's go right here. Okay, so so here we have our training tab, and we have our subhead, we have our numbered icons, the bulleted icons, and then we have our links. So as you can see that each URL has, or each link rather, has its URL in parentheses. And as I hover over this, my mouse changes, or my mouse icon changes to a finger. So that means I can actually click on it if I wanted to, and then be redirected to that page or that email address. So that's what it looks like in the PDF format. And the other thing you can see here is, the red box for this course not found. It does not publish. The red box doesn't publish, but that course not found, those words would be published if you didn't catch them. So that's what the PDF version looks like. All right. So a couple questions. Okay, so will the accuracy report take you to the problem link, or will you have to scroll through to find issues that it lists? So yes, Jennifer says that yes, you do have to look and find the link. Sometimes I use a search for this. Also, if a course will be coming in with import, but it isn't there, the imports haven't started, it's okay to leave it. Yes, that's a good point. And she runs a report later in the process that shows all missing courses and then chase down the page owners before publication. Okay, so thanks for that clarification. Now, when you're looking at this in a PDF format, just so you know, the software looks at this as one page, and so the tabs are kind of chunks of the same page. And so what we did was scroll down to find that training chunk of that page. Okay. All right. So the other thing before we continue. Okay. So how do you add a course if there is not one already that exists? So let's just look at that for a second. So, that is something, and Jennifer might add some maybe internal context to it. But let's say that course, that 501 course, what I did was I just typed in the course code, E81 501, CSC 501. And I typed it in and then clicked on this link here, and it said course not found. But let's say, for example, the 501 course has been approved. It just hasn't been updated in your SIS, for example. And so, maybe Jennifer, if you wanted to shed some light on this, but I would assume you can still go ahead and write it. But once that course is in your system, that not found piece will then go away. Jennifer, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you need to add a course that just isn't, if you needed to come in with the full course description and everything, it needs to happen in WooCursor, and then it'll be brought in with the import. You can just add it as text on the page, is totally fine too. Okay. But it won't have the link to the course description.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to point out is, actually, before we go on to the next piece, I do want to point out that there is this help icon in the page body editor. And so, if you need a refresher on how to create the links that we talked about, or, even just the bullet points, things like that, I would encourage you to use this help link. And what that will do is it will open up the page body editor part of our help page. And here, you will see on the right-hand side, this right-hand navigation bar, this area where it talks about page body editor, and it talks about, there's a section on formatting text where it talks about bulleted lists, headings, and then the link right under that, or the tab right under that is links. So it will talk about how to create links. And within this page, there are GIF videos, written instructions that tell you how to do some of the things that we just talked about. So this is a really good resource if you're, just trying to remember how to do something. And the other thing I would actually, I do want to mention is that there is a help icon here on the toolbar. I would not encourage you to use this help icon, only because it redirects you to our main help site where you kind of have to search for what you're looking for. So this is a little bit more work, I think, whereas if you click on in the page body editor and click on the help icon in the page body editor, it's going to be a little bit more easier to find the item that you're looking for. Okay. So the other thing I want to talk about is how to copy and paste. And when you do a copy and paste, what we don't want you to do is just do kind of a regular copy and paste like you would normally, because we want to make sure that the formatting is correct. It doesn't result in any oddities. And so let's say, for example, I want to go to, let's say, this tab, the courses tab here, and I want to copy this paragraph right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click in the courses pencil icon, and I'm going to select this paragraph about prerequisites. And what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and click on this little copy link, this copy icon right here. and go ahead and close that out. Go to the training tab and open up the training page body editor. And then when I go ahead and paste this in, I want to click on this little clipboard with a T in the middle of it right here. So when I go here, it says paste as plain text, and it will open up this, this pop-up box, and I'll go ahead and just right click and hit paste. And then it will then enter that text in and then I'll then click OK. And now I have my paragraph in exactly as it should be. So this, I would say, is probably the best way to do it. So that way you're not having to reformat anything or have anything kind of show, display that really might be a little bit off. And yes, that is true. So Jennifer just added the copy and paste function could also be useful, would be useful if you're copying something directly from another website like your departmental site. So that's also, you know, an important tool there. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to do a course list. And so a course list is basically a table where you have a list of courses. And so when I go and do a course list, the first thing I want to do is go to the icon that is this one right here. It looks like a grid. It says edit, insert, edit formatted table. So when I click on that, I'm going to see this pop-up box and it will say course list. So I'm going to click OK. And I'll get this interface, and this left side here looks exactly like your course picker that we saw in the inline course reference. And so if I were to do something with computer science again, I'm going to select my department, and I see all my courses populating from this list here, from this in this box. And my goal is to select a certain number of courses and have them appear in the box on the right. So to move those courses in, what I'm going to do is start selecting them and then go to this arrow icon that's pointing to the right that says add selected to course list. And then I can just single click, single click, single click, and just add those into this box. I can also double click using this box here on the left. So double click, double click, double click will do the same thing. All right. Now let's say I want to add the total sum hours of these courses. I'm just going to click on the sum hours checkbox here. And then once I've gone this far, I'm just going to click OK so we can see what it looks like. And let's just make this a little bit bigger here. So we can see that we have a course list that has our course code, the name of the course, and the credit hours. And we can see then there's the total units added up at the very end. When I click OK, and we can see what it looks like from the viewer side, this is what we have so far. And so with each of these being hyperlinks, it will then open up to that course bubble with the description. Now I can modify this a little bit more. And what I'll do is go back into the page body editor and add a little bit more detail. So if I need to edit an existing course list, like this one, you know, let's say I need to add some more components to it, it's a blue box. And so similar to the inline course reference, anything in a blue box is clickable. So I'm just going to double click to open up that interface back up. All right, so now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start filling out some of these components here. And so let's say for my CSC, my 131 course, I want to make a comment about this course. And let's say that comment is spring only. So this comment only correlates with 131. 131R, let's say I want this as a sequence course. So they have to take this in conjunction with something else. So let's say I type in E81 CSE 222S. Okay, so the sequence only applies to this 131 course. Now, if I click back on 131, I have that comment showing again. So that comment didn't go away. It's just kind of connected to that particular course. And the 131R is connected to that sequence field. Cross-reference, 132, cross-reference. Let's say they have to take this and it's cross-referenced with something else. So let's say if it's a different subject area, I can go ahead and let's say I pick general engineering. For example, I'll select the general engineering and then I can just type in, let's say E60 ENGR 120. So it's a cross-reference with this 132 course. This might be a little bit tricky. So seminar, let's say, okay, so this is interesting. You have units here. What do you use units for?
I think sometimes if we need to override
Oh,
for
okay.
whatever reason the number of units, or if we're adding a course that isn't yet in WooCursal and we just need to add the number of units.
Got it. Okay. All right. So let's say that you have a 204A and they have to take 204A or something else. So let's go back to our computer science area here and our OR course. They have to take 204 or E81 CSE 247. All right. Okay, so let's just pause here and click OK and see what we have. So our comment is going to appear in parentheses. Our AND course, so this is our sequence course, is going to show up as an indent. Now, this is actually something interesting because I might have just gotten lucky here, but this course here is showing us 4 credits. So it looked like it automatically added those 2 courses. Do you have situations, Jennifer, I guess, where they have to change the credit hours for the AND?
I thought the AND usually did add them since they're supposed to take both courses, but
okay.
But yeah, possibly. I mean, I guess that's why that units option is in there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just go back to that for a second. So it automatically added that in, but let's say, for example, that units of 4 credits was incorrect. You can always go in here and just modify that number with this units. But it looked like it worked here, so I'm not gonna really mess with that. But that's just something that you can change if needed be. My sequence course, I'm sorry, my cross-listed course is going to be with this dash here, and then my OR course is going to be indented. So that's what I have right now, and everything looks pretty clear. The other thing that you may run into is that you might want to do a footnote on one of your courses. So to do a footnote, I'm going to go back in here and let's say I want a footnote with this data science course. So here I have my footnote field. I can just type in the number 1 and hit OK. And obviously with a footnote, you have to say what the footnote is referencing. So when you get down to the bottom of your page, you can see that there's this dotted red line with the arrow, with this little arrow icon here. When you see that, go ahead and click on it because that will then generate a new line to appear on the page body editor. So here I want to reference what my footnote is about. Now to do that, you actually have to create what's called a footnote table. And it's not really a formal table, it's more of a footnote box. So to do the footnote, you're going to go back into this grid icon. And instead of course list, you're going to go and click on the drop down item, and you'll go down and select footnotes. And footnotes, after you've selected that, click OK, and you're going to get this box that's really ginormous looking. And here you're going to type in your number 1 again under symbol, and it will then generate the number 1 up here automatically. And then this box is kind of like your mini page body editor, but this is the field in which you're going to type in your footnote. So that's my footnote. And once I do that, I'll click OK, and it will appear like this in the page body editor. Now, once I click OK in the page body editor, on the actual page itself, it will just look like a regular footnote that you would see in a textbook. So that's what that footnote piece looks like. All right, now the other item in the table area is, let's say you add a new course. And so what you can do here is, let's say you don't see your course here, or let's say, maybe you do see your course, but you just don't have time to scroll all the way through. What you can do is, well, let's say the scenario is you have a new course that has not been generated in this dropdown yet. What you would do is click on this add comment entry. And when you click on the add comment entry, what you'll do is you'll see this pop-up box, and you're then going to type in your new course code. So let's say, for example, I might be, okay, let's just use this. I already had this set up here. So 576, and then you're going to type in the colon, and then the whatever the title of that course is. So the course code, colon, and then the title of the course. No spaces between the course code and the colons and the title of the course. So that's what you're going to enter. And obviously title of course, I mean, the actual title of the course, not these words. So once I've typed that into the box, I'll click OK, and it's going to look like this. It's going to look like it looks a little off in the interface. Don't let that throw you off, but that is what it's supposed to look like. Now here, because it's a new course, here is a good reason where you can type in the units. And so let's say it's 3 units. And so once I do that and click OK, what'll happen is it will appear like this. So the course code will line up with all the other course codes, and the title will appear here. And then the units will appear in the unit column. All right, so when we click OK again to actually see what this looks like in the user view, you'll see that this is what the course code looks like, the title and the units. And obviously once that new course comes through in your system, we would expect that there would be a hyperlink. So that is how you would enter a new course that you might not be seeing appear right away in the dropdown. All right, so that's what you can do with a new course. Going back in this area under your course list, the quick add is something that you can use. So let's say, for example, you don't have time to type or scroll down. You can just type in that particular course that you're looking for. And let's say CSC 498, quick add, and it will just add that in for you. The other things that you can do are using the move up or move down area. So the move up or move down is where, let's say, I actually added this in right here, but let's say I have this seminar here and maybe my cursor is right here and I wanted to add a few more courses. Okay, so this obviously it doesn't make sense in the numbering convention, so I can go ahead and do a move down so it is in the right order. And also, you know, move down or move up so I can get that situated as I need to. So those are a couple other tools that you can use. The other one that I wanted to point out, move down. Okay, so the other one I wanted to point out was in regards to another add comment entry, and I don't know if this is something you'll use on a regular basis, but add comment entry can also be used to kind of add some separation between courses. So let's say I have electives. I want to identify that certain courses are electives, so I can have this as a header and maybe create like an area header and maybe move this up or something along those lines, just to identify that this is a different from the courses right above it. And if you want, you can also, you know, if this is stylistically appropriate for you, you can go ahead and indent some of these. And when I click on this, what that looks like is I have my regular courses, but then I have my list of electives that are slightly indented, just so I have some separation and just some clarity on how these courses are different from the other ones right above it. All right, so that's my course list. Okay, so after the course list, I want to go and just go over briefly the course plan. So the course plan is going to be exactly the same, almost exactly the same as the course list. And really the only difference is when I go back into this grid icon, instead of course list, I'm going to go to course plan. When I select course plan and click OK, I'm going to see the exact same interface, except I have this year and term item up at the top. Now, what I can't do is I can't just start selecting my department, my school, and my subject area and start adding courses, because it's going to give me a pop-up saying you have to add your year and term. And this course plan is really ideal if you are trying to communicate to students, to prospective students, okay, this is the suggested plan of study that we want you to abide by. So first year fall, they're going to take these two courses. First year spring, they're going to take these two courses. And then let's say second year fall, they'll take these two courses. Second year spring, they'll take these two courses. Now, I didn't lose any of that data that I put in about first year's selection. So if I go back to first year, that information is still there. It's just kind of keeping that in lock once I've entered that. These items will work very similarly as with the course table. But once I've selected my plan of study and built that up and click OK, the course plan will be laid out like this. So my first year, here are my courses. My second year, here are my courses, you know. And so when I click this, let's see what it looks like actually in our view. We have our fall and our spring first year. So we have a little bit different layout. So we have our fall first year, spring second, spring term, second year, fall and spring columns. So that's what it's going to look like if you do a course plan. Now, similar to the links that I talked about earlier, if you need a refresher on how to do those tables, go to this help icon right here in the page body editor. And when I open this up, there is actually a link under the page body editor, a separate link called tables. And it will then open up once I click on this little caret here that says course lists. So course lists will talk you through how to build that course list and have written instructions and GIF videos. And then the other thing you'll see is footnotes. So there is a section on how to create footnotes with GIF videos, written instructions. And then now your course plan in our software is called the Plan of Study Grid. So Plan of Study Grid is your course plan. So this is the item that you would direct yourself to in the help site if you wanted to refresh yourself on how to do your course plan. All right, so that section is available on our help site. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to mention is predefined tables. And predefined tables are basically tables that already exist in your bulletin, but you want them to be displayed on your page. So you're not recreating, well, I should say, you might be recreating the content of the table, but you have the skeleton of the table. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, if I go back into this grid icon right here, instead of course list, I will see this item in the middle called predefined table. And predefined table, once I select that and click OK, I'm going to get a bunch of drop downs of different tables that already exist. And again, these are tables that really have been developed for the bulletin, and they've been created so that the pattern is already there. So let's say I pick this day date description right here. And if I click on that and click OK, it's giving me the structure of the table. Okay, thank you. So Jennifer's saying we don't have the ability to create tables on the fly, so the predefined tables are tables that have been created for us previously that you can use on your page. So if you need something you don't see here, contact me, and Leapfrog can create it for us. That is true. So yeah, that's something that's really important in terms of what is available to you. Let's just take a look at this really quickly again. So this table exists somewhere on your bulletin, and maybe the parameters are slightly different for your department, but you're filling out the information. And, let me just kind of just type in something here. All right, and if I click OK, this is what it would look like. So the structure, the pattern, or the template is already there. You're just filling in the specific information for your department. So that's what a predefined table is. Okay, so we're almost done. Two more things I want to show you. One is, and this is something that Jennifer will really kind of oversee, but one of the things that you do have available on your page is, or available to you, is this area called shared content. And shared content is basically content in your bulletin that has been identified as information that the university has deemed usable in multiple places. So this WashU Health page, this is information that technically is not published, but it's content that could in theory be used in multiple places. If there is a piece of shared content that you need to add, just ask Jennifer and she can do that for you. but in case you want to look at what the shared content is, it's /shared on the URL. So this will give you a list of all the shared pieces of content. All right. So the last piece of this is in regards to the approval area. And so when I go into your approval page area, let me make sure I can actually go in. I'm going to go in here as an administrator. I'm on a different browser here. But when you go into your approval area, and to get there, really you'll want to just type in CourseLeaf /approved. And just a clarification that Jennifer pointed out on the chat, shared content is either used on multiple pages, or it may be used if a certain chunk of information needs to be placed on a page with a different owner. So the approval area, one thing that you'll want to do, and I'm just going to make this bigger so you can see it, is you'll want to select your role. So your role is going to be in this drop down here. And whatever your role is, you're going to select that. So let's say I'm in the C's CSC owner drop down, and you'll see this long rectangular box. This is your page approval queue. Each of these line items represents a different page in the catalog. And so when I select that item, that particular line item, I can then scroll down on the page and see, okay, these are what that page looks like. So I'm seeing a preview of that page. And actually, let me just maybe look at a different page here. So this cybersecurity, for example. So this is a preview of my page, or a page that I would need to approve. And if you like what you see, you would just click approve, click that green approve button. And then what happens is once you click that green approve button, that line item will then disappear. Now you do have the option of clicking edit or roll back. So if I click on edit on this page, it's going to then open up that toolbar that we talked about earlier. And here, since this is a page that actually only has one, really one interface, there's no tabs on this page, you can click on the page body editor, the page body pencil icon here, to open up that page and then make any adjustments that you need to. And once you've made any changes, you can click OK, and that's the same thing as save. And then to close the toolbar, you would just click the edit icon again to close that toolbar. So once you've made your change, you can then go ahead and hit approve. And now, if you see coloring, such as here, like this, I just happened to just click on this one, that means the green is indicating new information. So that is an indication that, okay, that's new stuff that I didn't see before. But again, review the information, click approve if it looks good. Now, in the rare case that you have issues with the page that you're editing or you're reviewing, you do have the option to send it back to the author. And so you have this icon called rollback. And when you click on that, it will then roll it back, or it will automatically by default show the author's name. And so if you are going to roll back, you're going to say why you're rolling back in this box here, and then select rollback. So if I just open the rollback box here, that clicked on that icon and hit rollback, it's going to then give me this message saying comments are required for a rollback. So I want to say why I'm sending it back. And if you do a rollback, what will happen is it will then get sent to the author, and then it will come back to you. So you're being asked to review it a second time. All right. Now, the other component in this page here is, once you are looking at a page or you're, wondering what happens after I click approve, well, in this area right here, there is this tab called the workflow status. And workflow status is showing you who else is involved in the workflow. So you can see here, if I'm the C's computer science and engineering owner, because that's my role, I can see, oh, here are the other roles that will be looking at this page. This is the other parts of that workflow. So if you're just curious and figuring out, okay, who else is looking at my page, this area, this pending area, will show you who is coming after you. All right. So those are the key things that you will need to know in regards to the approval area for those of you who are going to be going into this space. So I want to stop for a minute. Does anyone have additional questions based on what we've talked about today? Or Jennifer, if you have anything to add, feel free to add that.
I don't think I really do. I think you covered everything really well. No, I guess if nobody has any questions, I just want to mention, you can email or call me anytime that you do have questions, or try to reach me through Microsoft Teams. But I think that's about it.
All right, very good.
Well, great. Thanks everyone for making time to come today. And like I mentioned, I think we'll try to post this video very soon. And again, I'm always here at your help desk for anything related to the bulletin. So thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.